we're going to check to make sure we're online. Give me a second. All right. Let's see. And double check. Okay. Wait 1 second. Make sure that we're streaming. Now we're going to check to be sure you are online. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. Here we go. Let me get the guitar. And we will start. Oh, ready. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Jaya Jai. Hey Jaya Jaya Madhava Jai. Ulataro Liliman Dalamai Jai. Ulataro Liliman Vardana Feshe, Hatinas Kutavinda, Dineshe. Kamotaro Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharne Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deja Tarane Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So we're going to continue with our study of Krishna book. Yesterday, of course, we had the commemoration of the disappearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the spiritual master of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Let me read the translation of this poem by Rupa Goswami that I just chanted. O Radha, all glories unto you. All glories unto you, beloved of Madhava, object of worship for all the young girls of Gokula. You dress yourself in such a way as to increase Lord Damodar's love and attachment for you. You are the controller of Vrindavan, the pleasure groves of Lord Hari. You are a new moon arisen from the ocean of King Vrishabhanu. You are the friend of Lita, and your wonderful qualities, friendliness, kindness, and faithfulness to Krishna, endear you to Vishaka. You are an ocean of compassion, and your divine characteristics are described by the four Kumaras, Sanaka, Sanatan, Sananda, and Sanat Kumar. O Radha, please be merciful to me. So, anyway, a beautiful song by Srila Rupa Goswami. So, we'll continue with our study of Krishna book. Om Gana Timidanda Shah Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Meditam Yena Tasmai Shi Gurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with a torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So it looks like the volume is plenty high here. Anyway, I can make it a little higher if it's low, too low for people. But it's set pretty high. But I'll make it a little higher just for everybody's benefit. Okay, so we're going to continue with our reading of Krishna book. So we're reading from the 80th chapter of Krishna book. And today we have the chapter, I believe it's about Sudama Brahman. Yeah, it's about Sudama Brahman. So let me share the screen. It's very exciting. We're almost finished with Krishna book. As I said before, the largest chapter in the Krishna book is the chapter dealing with, hold on, I'm trying to share the screen, but somebody's blocking my, that's funny, okay. So the largest chapter is the prayers of personified Vedas, and that should take several days, but other than that, there's only 90 chapters in the Krishna book. So let's continue reading Srila Prabhupada's commentary on the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay. So, chapter 80, the meeting of Lord Krishna with Sudama Brahmana. Very interesting story. King Parikshit was hearing the narrations of the pastimes of Lord Krishna and Balaram from Shukadeva Goswami. These pastimes are all transcendently pleasurable to hear. And Maharaj Parikshit addressed Shukadeva Goswami as follows. My dear Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is the bestower of both liberation and love of God simultaneously. I know it's simultaneously, but I put a little Spanish accent there. Anyone who becomes a devotee of the Lord automatically attains liberation without having to make a separate attempt. Because the Lord is unlimited, his pastimes and activities for creating, maintaining, and destroying the whole cosmic manifestation are also unlimited. I therefore wish to hear about other pastimes of his, which you may not have described as yet. My dear master, the conditioned souls within this material world are frustrated by searching out the pleasure of happiness derived from sense gratification. Such desires for material enjoyment are always piercing the hearts of conditioned souls. But I am actually experiencing how the transcendental topics of Lord Krishna's pastimes can relieve one from being affected by such material activities of sense gratification. I think that no intelligent person can reject this method of hearing the transcendental pastimes of the Lord again and again. Simply by hearing, one can remain always steeped in transcendental pleasure. Thus, one will not be attracted by material sense gratification. In this statement, Maharaj Pariksit has used two important words, Vishana and Vishesha Jnana. Vishana means morose. Materialistic people invent many ways and means to become fully satisfied, but actually they remain morose. The point may be raised that sometimes transcendentalists also remain morose. Pariksit Maharaj, however, has used the word Vishesha Jnana. There are two kinds of transcendentalists, namely the impersonalists and the personalists. Vishesha Jnana refers to the personalists who are interested in transcendental variegatedness. Devotees become jubilant by hearing the descriptions of the personal activities of the Supreme Lord, whereas the impersonalists, who are actually more attracted by the impersonal feature of the Lord, are only superficially attracted by the Lord's personal activities. As such, in spite of coming in contact with the pastimes of the Lord, the impersonalists do not fully realize the benefit to be derived, and thus they become just as morose as the materialists do in pursuing their fruitive activities. And not only are they morose, but they are frustrated. King Pariksit continued, the ability to talk can be perfected only by describing the transcendental qualities of the Lord. The ability to work with one's hands can be successful only when one engages himself in the service of the Lord with those hands. Similarly, one's mind can be peaceful only when one simply thinks of Krishna in full Krishna consciousness. This does not mean that one has to have very great thinking power. One has to understand simply that Krishna, the absolute truth, is all-pervasive by his localized aspect of Paramatma. If one can simply think that Krishna, as Paramatma, is everywhere, even within the atom, then one can perfect the thinking, feeling, and willing functions of his mind. The perfect devotee does not see the material world as it appears to material eyes, for he sees everywhere the presence of his worshipable Lord in his Paramatma feature. Maharaj Pariksit continued by saying that the function of the ear can be perfected simply by engagement in hearing the transcendental activities of the Lord, and the function of the head can be fully utilized when the head is engaged in bowing down before the Lord and his representative. That the Lord is represented in everyone's heart is a fact, and therefore the highly advanced devotee offers his respects to every living entity, considering that the body is the temple of the Lord. But it is not possible for all men to come to that stage of life immediately, because that stage is for the first-class devotee. The second-class devotee can consider the Vaishnavas or the devotees of the Lord to be representatives of Krishna, and the devotee who is just beginning, the neophyte or third-class devotee, can bow his head before the deity in the temple and before the spiritual master, who is the direct manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, in the neophyte stage, in the intermediate stage, or in the fully advanced perfected stage, one can make the function of the head perfect by bowing down before the Lord or his representative. Similarly, one can perfect the function of the eyes by seeing the Lord and his representative. In this way, everyone can elevate the functions of the different parts of his body to the highest perfectional stage simply by engaging them in the service of the Lord or his representative. If one is able to do nothing more, he can simply bow down before the Lord and his representative and drink the Charanamrita, the water which has washed the lotus feet of the Lord. On hearing the statements of Maharaj Pariksit, Shukadeva Goswami was overwhelmed with devotional ecstasy because of King Parikshit's advanced understanding of the Vaishnava philosophy. Shukadeva Goswami was already engaged in describing the activities of the Lord, and when asked by Maharaj Pariksit to describe them further, he continued to narrate Srimad Bhagavatam with great pleasure. Here we go. And here's the story. There was a very nice Brahmin friend of Lord Krishna. As a perfect Brahmana, he was very elevated in transcendental knowledge, and because of his advanced knowledge, he was not at all attached to material enjoyment. Therefore, he was very peaceful and had achieved supreme control over his senses. This means that the Brahmana was a perfect devotee, because unless one is a perfect devotee, he cannot achieve the highest standard of knowledge. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that a person who has come to the perfection of knowledge surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, any person who has surrendered his life for the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has come to the point of perfect knowledge. The result of perfect knowledge is that one becomes detached from the materialistic way of life. This detachment means complete control of the senses, which are always attracted by material enjoyment. The senses of the devotee become purified, and at that stage, the senses are engaged in the service of the Lord. That is the complete field of devotional service. Although the Brahmin friend of Lord Krishna was a householder, he was not busy accumulating wealth for very comfortable living. Therefore, he was satisfied by the income which automatically came to him according to his destiny. This is the sign of perfect knowledge. A man in perfect knowledge knows that one cannot be happier than he is destined to be. In this material world, everyone is destined to suffer a certain amount of distress and enjoy a certain amount of happiness. The amount of happiness and distress is already predestined for every living entity. No one can increase or decrease the happiness of the materialistic way of life. Of course, you can increase the happiness of spirituality, of spiritual life, by taking up Krishna consciousness. The Brahmana therefore did not exert himself for more material happiness. Instead, he used his time for the advancement of Krishna consciousness. Externally, he appeared very poor because he had no rich clothes and could not provide rich clothes for his wife. Because the material condition was not very opulent, they were not even eating sufficiently, and thus both he and his wife appeared very thin. The wife was not anxious for her personal comfort, but she felt concerned for her husband, who was such a pious Brahmin. She trembled due to her weak health, and although she did not like to dictate to her husband, she spoke as follows. My dear Lord, now she's talking to her husband, the Lord. I know that Lord Krishna, the husband of the goddess of fortune, is your personal friend. You're also a devotee of Lord Krishna, and he is always ready to help his devotee. Even if you think that you are not rendering any devotional service to the Lord, still you are surrendered to him, and the Lord is the protector of the surrendered soul. Moreover, I know that Lord Krishna is the ideal personality of Vedic culture. He is always in favor of Brahminical culture and is very kind to the qualified Brahmanas. You are the most fortunate person because you have as your friend the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna is the only shelter for personalities like you because you are fully surrendered unto him. You are saintly, learned, and fully in control of your senses under the circumstances. Lord Krishna is your only shelter. Please, therefore, go to him. I'm sure that he will immediately understand your impoverished position. You are a householder, therefore, without money, you are in distress. But as soon as he understands your position, he will certainly give you sufficient riches so that you can live very comfortably. Lord Krishna is now the king of the Bhoja, Vrishni, and Andaka dynasties, and I've heard that he never leaves his capital city, Dwarka. He is living there without outside engagements. He is so kind and liberal that he immediately gives everything, even to his personal self, to any person who surrenders unto him. Since he is prepared to give himself personally to his devotee, there is nothing wonderful in giving some material riches. Of course, he does not give much material wealth to his devotee, if the devotee is not very much fixed, but I think that in your case he knows perfectly well how much you are fixed in devotional service. Therefore, he will not hesitate to award you some material benefit from the bare necessities of life. So, try to remember, it's not that the wife was materialistic. The wife was concerned with Vaishnava Seva. And who was the Vaishnava she was serving? Her husband. She's very concerned with her husband's health, well-being, and everything like that. And for Vaishnava Seva, you could ask things from the Lord. That is perfectly okay, bona fide. In this way, the wife of the Brahmin again and again requested in great humility and submission that he go to Lord Krishna. Actually, Vaishnava seva is higher than seva to the Lord. The Brahmana thought that there was no need to ask any material benefit from Lord Sri Krishna, but he was induced by the repeated requests of his wife. Moreover, he thought, if I go there, I should be able to see the Lord personally. That will be a great opportunity, even if I don't ask any material benefit from him. He was not planning to ask Krishna for anything. When he had decided to go to Krishna, he asked his wife if she had anything in the home that he could offer to Krishna, because he must take some presentation for his friend. The wife immediately collected 4 palmfuls of chipped rice from her neighborhood friends and tied it in a small cloth like a handkerchief and gave it to her husband to present to Krishna. Without waiting any longer, the Brahmana took the presentation and proceeded towards Dwarka to see his Lord. He was absorbed in the thought of how he would be able to see Lord Krishna. He had no thought within his heart other than Krishna. It was, of course, very difficult to reach the palaces of the kings of the Yadu dynasty, but the Brahmanas were allowed to visit. When the Brahmana friend of Lord Krishna went there, he, along with other Brahmanas, had to pass through 3 military encampments. In each camp, there were very big gates, and he also had to pass through them. After the gates and the camps, there were 16,000 big palaces, the residential quarters of the 16,000 queens of Lord Krishna. The Brahmana entered one palace, which was very gorgeously decorated. When he entered this beautiful palace, he felt that he was swimming in the ocean of transcendental pleasure. He felt himself constantly diving and surfing in that transcendental ocean. Surfacing, not surfing, sorry. Oh my God. Shows where my mind is at. Surfacing in that transcendental ocean. Not surfing. At that time, Lord Krishna was sitting on the bedstead of Queen Rukmini. Even from a considerable distance, he could see the Brahmana coming to his home, and he could recognize him as his friend. Lord Krishna immediately left his seat, came forward to receive his Brahmin friend, and upon reaching him, embraced the Brahmana with his 2 arms. Lord Krishna is the reservoir of all transcendental pleasure, yet he himself felt great pleasure upon embracing the poor Brahmana because he was meeting his very dear friend. Lord Krishna had him seated on his own bedstead and personally brought him all kinds of fruits and drinks to offer him, as is proper in receiving a worshipable guest. Lord Sri Krishna is the supreme pure, but because he was playing the role of an ordinary human being, he immediately washed the Brahman's feet and for his own purification sprinkled the water onto his head. After this, the Lord smeared the body of the Brahmin with different kinds of scented pulps such as sandalwood, algaru, and saffron. He immediately burned several kinds of scented incense, and as is usual, offered him arti with burning lamps. After thus offering him an adequate welcome, and after the Brahmana had taken food and drink, Lord Krishna said, "My dear friend, it is a great fortune you have come here." The Brahmana, being very poor, was not dressed nicely. His clothing was torn and dirty, and his body was very lean and thin. He appeared not very clean, and because of his weak body, his bones were distinctly visible. The goddess of fortune, Rukmini Devi, personally began to fan him with the chamara fan, but the other women in the palace were astonished at Lord Krishna's behavior in receiving the Brahman in that way. They were surprised to see how eager Lord Krishna was to welcome this particular Brahmana. They wondered how Lord Krishna could personally receive a Brahmana who was poor, not very neat or clean, and poorly dressed, but at the same time they could realize that the Brahmana was not an ordinary living being. They knew that he must have performed great pious activities, otherwise why was Lord Krishna, the husband of the goddess of fortune, taking care of him so much? They were still more surprised to see that the Brahmana was seated on the bedstead of Lord Krishna. They were especially surprised to see that Lord Krishna had embraced him exactly as he embraced his elder brother, Balaramaji, because Lord Krishna used to embrace only Rukmini or Balaram and no one else. Wow. After the Brahmana had been received very nicely, he was seated on Lord Krishna's own cushioned bed. He and Krishna took each other's hands and began to talk about their early life when they had both lived under the protection of the Gurukula, a boarding school. Lord Krishna said, "My dear Brahmin friend, you are a most intelligent personality and you know very well the principles of religious life. I believe that after you finished your education at the house of our teacher and after you sufficiently remunerated him, you must have gone back to your home and accepted a suitable wife. I know very well that from the beginning you are not at all attached to the materialistic way of life, nor did you desire to be very opulent materially, and therefore you are in need of money. In this material world, persons who are not attached to material opulence are very rarely found. Such unattached persons haven't the least desire to accumulate wealth and prosperity for sense gratification, but sometimes they are found to collect money just to exhibit the exemplary life of a householder. They show how by proper distribution of wealth, one can become an ideal householder and at the same time a great devotee. Such ideal householders are to be considered followers of my footsteps. I hope, my dear Brahmana friend, that you remember all those days of our school life when you and I were living together at the boarding school. Actually, whatever knowledge you and I received in life was accumulated in our student life. If a man is sufficiently educated in student life under the guidance of a proper teacher, his life becomes successful in the future. He can very easily cross over the ocean of nescience, and he is not subject to the influence of the illusory energy. My dear friend, everyone should consider his father to be his first teacher, because by the mercy of one's father, one gets his body. The father is therefore the natural spiritual master. Our next spiritual master is he who initiates us into transcendental knowledge, and he is to be worshipped as much as I am. The spiritual master may be more than one. The spiritual master who instructs the disciple about spiritual matters is called the Siksha Guru, and the spiritual master who initiates the disciple is called the Diksha Guru. Both of them are my representatives. There may be many spiritual masters who instruct, but the instructor, the initiator spiritual master is one. A human being who takes advantage of these spiritual masters and receiving proper knowledge from them crosses the ocean of material existence is to be understood as having properly utilized his human form of life. He has practical knowledge of the ultimate interest of life, which is to be gained only in this human form, is to achieve spiritual perfection and thus be transferred back home, back to Godhead. My dear friend, I am Paramatma, the Super Soul present in everyone's heart, and it is my direct order that human society follow the principles of Varna and Ashrama. As I have stated in the Bhagavad Gita, human society should be divided into 4 varnas according to quality and action. Similarly, everyone should divide his life into 4 parts. One should utilize the first part of life in becoming a bona fide student, receiving adequate knowledge and keeping oneself in the vow of brahmacharya, so that one may completely devote his life for the service of the spiritual master without indulging in sense gratification. A brahmachari is meant to lead a life of austerities and penance. The householder is meant to live a regulated life of sense gratification, but no one should remain a householder for the 3rd stage of life. In that stage, one has to return to the austerities and penances formerly practiced in brahmachari life, and thus relieve himself of the attachment to household life. After being relieved of his attachment to the materialistic way of life, one may accept the order of sannyas. So, of course, in Kali Yuga, in Prabhupada's movement, Prabhupada actually considered the grahastas to be brahmacharis. He used to call grahasta brahmachari because they're engaged fully in Krishna's service. And also, the preferable stage of renunciation for the grahastas is something called kshetra sannyas in Kali Yuga, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which means they remain in a holy place serving the Lord together, but none of the really tremendous sense gratification. Anyway, whatever. And or they travel and preach or render service to the mission. Prabhupada expected that of the older householders after their children were grown up. As the super soul, living entities, I sit in everyone's heart and observe everyone's activity in every stage and order of life. Regardless of which stage one is in, when I see that one is engaged seriously and sincerely in discharging the duties ordered by the spiritual master, thus dedicating his life to the service of the spiritual master, that person becomes most dear to me. Well, as far as the life of brahmacharya is concerned, if one can continue the life of brahmacharya under the direction of the spiritual master, that is extremely good. But if in brahmachari life one feels sex impulses, he should take leave of his spiritual master, satisfying him according to the Guru's desire. According to the Vedic system, a gift is offered to the spiritual master, which is called Guru Dakshina. Then the disciple should take the household life and accept a wife according to religious rites. These instructions given by Lord Krishna while talking with his friend, the learned Brahmana, are very good for the guidance of human society. A system of human civilization that does not promote Varna and ashram is nothing but a polished animal society. Indulgence in sex life by a man or woman living single is never acceptable in human society. A man should strictly follow the principles of brahmachari life, or with the permission of the spiritual master should get married. Single life with illicit sex is animal life, for the animals have no such institution as marriage. So let's talk about Varna and ashram. So the Varna ashram system is not the caste system. It simply means that one takes a particular type of work according to one's nature to maximize one's service to the Supreme Personality of God. That's Varna. Okay, got it. And ashram, one situates himself or herself in a particular ashram so that one is able to be stable and steady in one's service to the spiritual master and service to society in general. You know, the ashram is based upon stability. Whatever helps one become stable the most, that's one's ashram, and one should stay in that ashram, gradually becoming more renounced in that ashram. It happens to be the householder ashram, and you can stay. That's called the Kshetra Sannyas. Okay, and Prabhupada talks about this in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we're not talking about instituting varnashram in terms of pegging people with a certain varna. And of course, we do peg people with a certain ashram because there's rules of certain ashrams. You know, you don't want brahmacharis, gentlemen brahmacharis, so to speak, and we don't want brahmachari daddies or sannyasi daddies or whatever. So anyway, I think you understand what I mean. Modern society does not aim at fulfilling the mission of human life, which is to go back home, back to Godhead. To fulfill this mission, the system of Varna and Ashram must be followed. When the system is followed rigidly and consciously fulfills this mission, but when followed indirectly without the guidance of a superior authority, it simply creates a disturbing condition in human society, and there's no peace and prosperity. So indirectly means whatever you do, people will always find a particular type of work or situation in society, and if it's not guided, then society is in a very disturbed condition. So it has to be guided. You know, in other words, the leaders of society have to ascertain people's proper varna and ashram. That's all. Not that we discriminate against people of a different varna or different ashram. That's not the point. But it has to be guided by the authority. Well, let's not use the word authority, but by the spiritual personalities. Krishna used to talk with his Brahmin, continue to talk with his Brahmin friend. My dear friend, I think you remember our activities during these days when we were living as students. You may remember that once we went to collect fuel from the forest on the order of the Guru's wife. While collecting the dried wood, we entered the dense forest and by chance became lost. There was an unexpected dust storm and then clouds and lightning in the sky and the explosive sound of thunder. When sunset came and we were lost in the dark jungle. After this, there was severe rainfall. The whole ground was overflowed with water, and we could not trace out the way to return to our Guru's ashram. You may remember that heavy rainfall was not actually rainfall, but a sort of devastation. On account of the dust storm and the heavy rain, we began to feel greatly pained, and whichever direction we turned, we were bewildered. In that distressed condition, we took each other's hand and tried to find our way out. We passed the whole night in that way, and early in the next morning, when our absence became known to our Gurudev, he sent his other disciples in search us out. He also came with them, and when they reached us in the jungle, they found us very much distressed. Of course, there's more to the story than that. When they were in the jungle and lost, Sudama, the kid, had saved some food for himself, and he didn't share it with Krishna. And because he didn't share it with Krishna, then later on he became impoverished. Okay. Big mistake. Should have shared it. With great compassion, our Gurudev said, "My dear boys, it is very wonderful that you have suffered so much trouble for me. Everyone likes to take care of his body as first consideration. But you are so good and faithful to your Guru that without caring for bodily comforts, you have taken so much trouble for me. I'm glad to see that bona fide students like you will undergo any kind of trouble for the satisfaction of the spiritual master. That is the way of a bona fide disciple to become free from his debt to the spiritual master. It is the duty of the disciple to dedicate his life to the service of the spiritual master. My dear best of the twice born, I am greatly pleased by your acts, and I bless you. May all your desires and ambitions be fulfilled. May the understanding of the Vedas, which you have learned from me, always continue to remain within your memory, so that every moment you can remember the teachings of the Vedas and quote their instructions without difficulty. Thus you will never be disappointed in this life and in the next. So, blessing Krishna. Krishna continued, my dear friend, you may remember that many such incidents occurred while we were in the ashram of our spiritual master. Both of us can realize that without the blessings of the spiritual master, no one can be happy. By the mercy of the spiritual master and by his blessings, one can achieve peace and prosperity and be able to fulfill the mission of human life. On hearing this, the learned Brahmana replied, my dear Krishna, you are the Supreme Lord and the Supreme Spiritual Master of everyone, and since I was fortunate enough to live with you in the house of our Guru, I think I have nothing more to do in the matter of prescribed Vedic duties. My dear Lord, the Vedic hymns, ritualistic ceremonies, religious activities, and all the necessities of the perfection of life, including economic development, sense gratification, liberation, are all the different processes of life, are all derived from one source, your Supreme Personality. All the different processes of life are ultimately meant for understanding your personality. In other words, they are the different parts of your transcendental form. And yet you played the role of a student and live with us in the house of the Guru. This means that you adopted all these pastimes for your pleasure only. Otherwise, there was no need for your playing the role of a human being. So that's the end of the chapter. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 80th chapter of Krishna, the meeting of Lord Krishna with Sudama Brahman. So chapter 81. The Brahman Sudama, blessed by Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the super soul of all living entities, knows everyone's heart very well. He's especially inclined to the Brahman devotees. Lord Krishna is also called Brahmanya Devaya, which means that he is worshipped by the Brahmanas. Therefore, it is understood that a devotee who is fully surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead has already acquired the position of a Brahman. Without becoming a Brahman, one cannot approach the Supreme Brahman, Lord Krishna. Krishna is especially concerned with vanquishing the distress of his devotees, and he is the only shelter of pure devotees. Lord Krishna engaged for a long time in talking with Sudama Vipra about their past association. Then, just to enjoy the company of an old friend, Lord Krishna began to smile and asked, my dear friend, what have you brought for me? Has your wife given you some nice eatable for me? While addressing his friend, Lord Krishna looked upon him and smiled with great love. He continued, my dear friend, you must have brought some presentation for me from your home. Lord Krishna knew that Sudama was hesitating to present him with the paltry chip rice, which was actually unfit for his eating. Understanding the mind of Sudama Vipra, the Lord said, my dear friend, I am certainly not in need of anything, but if my devotee gives me something as an offering of love, even though it may be very insignificant, I accept it with great pleasure. On the other hand, if a person is not a devotee, even though he may offer me very valuable things, I do not like to accept them. I actually accept only things offered to me in devotion and love. Otherwise, how valuable a thing may be, I do not accept it. If my pure devotee offers me even the most insignificant things, a little flour, a little piece of leaf, a little water, but saturates the offering in devotional love, then not only do I gladly accept such an offering, but I eat it with great pleasure. Lord Krishna assured Sudama Vipra that he would be very glad to accept the chip rice he had brought from home, yet out of great shyness, Sudama Vipra hesitated to present it to the Lord. He was thinking, how can I offer such an insignificant thing to Krishna? And he simply bowed his head. Lord Krishna, the Super Soul, knows everything in everyone's heart. He knows everyone's determination and everyone's want. Therefore, he knew the reason for Sudama Vipra's coming to him. He knew that, driven by extreme poverty, he had come there at the request of his wife. Thinking of Sudama as his very dear class friend, he knew that Sudama's love for him as a friend was never tainted by any desire for material benefit. Krishna thought, Sudama has not come asking anything from me. Being obliged by the request of his wife, he has come to see me just to please her. Lord Krishna therefore decided that he would give more material opulence to Sudamavipra than he could be imagined even by the king of heaven. He then snatched the bundle of chipped rice, which was hanging on the shoulder of the poor Brahmin, packed it in a corner of his wrapper, and said, "What is this? My dear friend, you have brought me nice, palatable chipped rice." He encouraged Sudamavipra, saying, "I consider that this quantity of chipped rice will satisfy not only me, but the whole creation." It is understood from this statement that Krishna, being the original source of everything, is the root of the entire creation. As watering the root of a tree immediately distributes water to every part of the tree, so an offering made to Krishna, or any action done for Krishna, is to be considered the highest welfare work for everyone, because the benefit of such an offering is distributed throughout the creation. Love for Krishna is distributed to all living entities. While Lord Krishna was speaking to Sudamavipra, he ate one morsel of chipped rice from his bundle, and when he attempted to eat a second morsel, Rukmini Devi, the goddess of fortune herself, checked the Lord by catching hold of his hand. After touching the hand of Krishna, Rukmini said, "My dear Lord, this one morsel of chipped rice is sufficient to cause him who offered it to become very opulent in this life, and to continue his opulence in the next life. My Lord, you are so kind to your devotee that even this one morsel of chipped rice pleases you very greatly, and your pleasure assures the devotee opulence in both this life and in the next." This indicates that when food is offered to Lord Krishna with love and devotion, and he is pleased and accepts it from his devotee, Rukmini Devi, the goddess of fortune, becomes so greatly obliged to the devotee that she has to go personally to the devotee's home to turn it into the most opulent home in the world. If one feeds Narayan sumptuously, the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, automatically becomes a guest in one's house, which means that one's home becomes opulent. The learned Brahmana Sudama passed that night at the house of Lord Krishna, and while there he felt as if he were living on a Vaikuntha planet. Actually, he was living in Vaikuntha because wherever Lord Krishna, the original Narayan, and Rukmini Devi, the goddess of fortune, lives is not different from the spiritual planets, Vaikuntha Loka. The learned Brahmana Sudama did not appear to have received anything substantial from Lord Krishna. While at his palace, yet he did not ask anything from the Lord. The next morning he started for his home, thinking always about his reception by Krishna, and thus emerged in transcendental bliss. All the way home, he simply remembered the dealings of Lord Krishna. He felt very happy to see the Lord. The Brahmana thought, "It is most pleasurable to see Lord Krishna, who is most devoted to the Brahmanas. How a great lover he is of the Brahminical culture. He is the supreme Brahman himself, yet he reciprocates with the Brahmanas. He also respects the Brahmanas so much that he embraced to his chest such a poor Brahman as me, although he never embraces anyone to his chest except the goddess of fortune. How can there be any comparison between me, a poor sinful Brahman, and the Supreme Lord Krishna, who is the only shelter of the goddess of fortune? And yet, considering me a Brahmana, with heartfelt pleasure he embraced me in his two transcendental arms. Lord Krishna was so kind to me that he allowed me to sit on the same bedstead where the goddess of fortune lies down. He considered me his real brother. How can I appreciate my obligation to him? When I was tired, Srimati Rukmini Devi, the goddess of fortune, began to fan me, holding the chamra whisk in her own hand. She never considered her exalted position as the first queen of Lord Krishna. I was rendered service by the Supreme Personality of Godhead because of his high regard for the Brahmanas, and by massaging my legs and feeding me with his own hand, he practically worshipped me. Aspiring for elevation to the heavenly planets, liberation, all kinds of material opulence, or perfection in the powers of mystic yoga, everyone throughout the universe worships the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Yet the Lord was so kind to me, he did not give me even a farthing, knowing very well that I am a poverty-stricken man who, if I got some money, might become puffed up and mad after material opulence and so forget him. The statement of the Brahman Sudama is correct. An ordinary man who is very poor and prays to the Lord for benediction material opulence and who somehow or other becomes richer in material opulence immediately forgets his obligation to the Lord. Therefore, the Lord does not offer opulences to his devotee unless the devotee is thoroughly tested. Rather, if a neophyte devotee serves the Lord very sincerely and at the same time wants material opulence, the Lord keeps him from obtaining it. Thinking in this way, the learned Brahmin gradually reached his own home, but there he saw that everything was wonderfully changed. He saw that in the place of his cottage there were big palaces made of valuable stones and jewels, glittering like the sun, moon, and rays of fire. Not only there were big palaces, but at intervals there were beautifully decorated parks in which many beautiful men and women were strolling. In those parks there were nice lakes full of lotus flowers and beautiful lilies, and there were flocks of multicolored birds. Seeing the wonderful conversion of his native place, the Brahmana began to think to himself, how am I seeing all these changes? Does this place belong to me or to someone else? If it is the same place where I used to live, then how is it so wonderfully changed? While the learned Brahmana was considering this, a group of beautiful men and women with features resembling those of demigods, accompanied by musical chanters, approached to welcome him. All were singing auspicious songs. The wife of the Brahmana was very glad on hearing the tidings of her husband's arrival. With great haste she came out of the palace. The Brahmana's wife appeared so beautiful that it seemed as if the goddess of fortune herself had come to receive him. As soon as she saw her husband present before her, tears of joy fell from her eyes, and her voice became so choked up that she could not even address her husband. She simply closed her eyes in ecstasy. But with great love and affection she bowed down before her husband, and within herself she thought of embracing him. She was fully decorated with a gold necklace and ornaments, and while standing among the maidservants she appeared like a demigod's wife just alighting from an airplane. The Brahmana was surprised to see his wife so beautiful and in great affection, and without saying a word he entered the palace with her. When the Brahmana entered his personal apartment in the palace, he saw there was not an apartment but the residence of the king of heaven. The palace was surrounded by many columns of jewels. The couches and the bedsteads were made of ivory and bedecked with gold and jewels, and the bedding was as white as the foam of milk and as soft as a lotus. There were many whisks hanging from golden rods and many golden thrones with sitting cushions as soft as lotus flowers. In various places there were velvet and silken canopies with laces of pearl hanging around. The structure of the building stood on excellent transparent marble with engravings made of emerald stones. All the women in the palace carried lamps made of valuable jewels. The flames and the jewels combined to produce a wonderful brilliant light. When the Brahmana saw his position suddenly changed to one of opulence, and when he could not determine the cause for such a change, he began to consider very gravely how it had happened. He thus began to think, from the beginning of my life I have been extremely poverty-stricken. So what could be the cause of such great and sudden opulence? I do not find any cause other than the all-merciful glance of my friend Lord Krishna, the chief of the Yadu dynasty. Certainly these are gifts of Lord Krishna's causeless mercy. The Lord is self-sufficient, the husband of the goddess of fortune, and thus he is always full with 6 opulences. He can understand the mind of his devotee, and he sumptuously fulfills the devotee's desires. All these are acts of my friend Lord Krishna. My beautiful dark friend Krishna is far more liberal than the cloud, which can fill the great ocean with water without disturbing the cultivator with rain during the day. The cloud brings liberal rain at night just to satisfy him. And yet when the cultivator wakes up in the morning, he thinks that it has not rained enough. Similarly, the Lord fulfills the desire of everyone according to his position. Yet one who is not in Krishna consciousness considers all the gifts of the Lord to be less than his desire. On the other hand, when the Lord receives a little thing in love and affection from his devotee, he considers it a great and valuable gift. I am a vivid example of this. I simply offered him a morsel of chip rice, and in exchange he has given me opulences greater than those of the King of Heaven. So let's see if we can finish this chapter. Let's see how much is left here. We may have too much left here. Yeah, there's actually quite a bit left. Well, maybe not that much. Anyway, we'll take a few extra minutes and finish. I won't have any time for questions then. Yeah, maybe we'll finish it tomorrow. Yeah, we'll finish it tomorrow. Because I want to give devotees time to ask questions, because this would just use up all our time. Okay, we'll finish it tomorrow. We'll go into the next chapter after that. Okay, so you are allowed to ask questions in the chat window. You are allowed to unmute yourself, and you are allowed to raise your hand. So who has a question? If no one has a question, I'll finish the chapter. You know, if you all want me to finish the chapter, I'll finish the chapter, and you won't ask a question. So it's up to you. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Okay, we are going to finish the chapter. Of course, you want to hear the end of the chapter. Okay, going back to Krishna book. And we will finish. What the devotee actually offers the Lord is not needed by the Lord, for he is self-sufficient. If the devotee offers something to the Lord, it acts for his own interest, because whatever the devotee offers, the Lord comes back in a quantity of 1,000,000 times greater than that which is offered, actually unlimited. One does not become a loser by giving to the Lord, one becomes a gainer by millions of times. The Brahmana, feeling great obligation to Krishna, thought, I pray to have the friendship of Lord Krishna and engage in his service, and to surrender fully unto him in love and affection life after life. I do not want any opulence, I only desire not to forget his service. I simply wish to be associated with his pure devotees. May my mind and activities be always engaged in his service. The unborn Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna knows that many great personalities have fallen from their positions because of extravagant opulence. Therefore, even when his devotee asks for some opulence from him, the Lord sometimes does not give it. He is very cautious about his devotees, because a devotee in an immature position of devotional service may, if offered great opulence, fall from this position due to being in the material world. The Lord does not offer opulence to him. This is another manifestation of the causeless mercy of the Lord upon his devotees. His first interest is that the devotee does not fall. That's really important. He is exactly like a well-wishing father who does not give much wealth unto the hands of his immature son, but who, when the son is grown up and knows how to spend the money, gives him the whole treasury house. The learned Brahmana thus concluded that whatever opulences he had received from the Lord should be used not for his extravagant sense gratification, but for the service of the Lord. The Brahmin accepted his newly acquired opulence, but he did so in the spirit of renunciation, remaining unattached to sense gratification, and thus he lived very peacefully with his wife, enjoying all the facilities of opulence as the prasadam of the Lord. He enjoyed varieties of food by offering it to the Lord and then taking it as prasadam. Similarly, if by the grace of the Lord we get such opulences, material wealth, fame, power, education, and beauty, it is our duty to consider that they are all gifts of the Lord and must be used for his service, not for our sense enjoyment. The learned Brahmana remained in that position, and thus his love and affection for Lord Krishna increased day after day. It did not deteriorate due to great opulence. Material opulence can be the cause of degradation and also the cause of elevation, according to the purposes for which it is used. If opulence is used for sense gratification, it is the cause of degradation, and if used for the service of the Lord, it is the cause of elevation. It is evident from Lord Krishna's dealings with Sudama Vipra that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very much pleased with a person who possesses Brahminical qualities. A qualified Brahmin like Sudama Vipra is naturally a devotee of Lord Krishna. Therefore, it is said, Brahmano Vaishnava. A Brahmana is a Vaishnava, or sometimes it is said, Brahmana Pandita. Pandita means a highly learned person. A Brahmana cannot be foolish or uneducated. Therefore, there are two divisions of Brahmanas, namely Vaishnavas and Panditas. Those who are simply learned are Panditas, but not yet devotees of the Lord or Vaishnavas. Lord Krishna is not especially pleased with them. Simply, the qualification of being a learned Brahmana is not sufficient to attract the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Not only must the Brahmana be well qualified according to the requirements stated in the scriptures such as Srimad Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, but at the same time he must be a devotee of Lord Krishna. The vivid example is Sudama Vipra. He was a qualified Brahmana, unattached to all sorts of material sense enjoyment. At the same time, he was a great devotee of Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna, the enjoyer of all sacrifices and penances, is very fond of a Brahmana like Sudama Vipra, and we have seen by the actual behavior of Lord Krishna how much he adores such a Brahmana. Therefore, the ideal stage of human perfection is to become a Brahmana Vaishnava like Sudama Vipra. Sudama Vipra realized that although Lord Krishna is unconquerable, he nevertheless agrees to be conquered by his devotees. He realized how kind Lord Krishna was to him, and he was always entranced, constantly thinking of Krishna. By such constant association with Lord Krishna, whatever darkness of material contamination remained within his heart was completely cleared away, and very shortly he was transferred to the spiritual kingdom, which is the goal of all saintly persons in the perfectional stage of life. Shukadeva Goswami has stated that all persons who hear this history of Sudama Vipra and Lord Krishna will know how affectionate Lord Krishna is to the Brahmin devotees like Sudam. Therefore, anyone who hears this history gradually becomes as qualified as Sudama Vipra, and he is thus transferred to the spiritual kingdom of Lord Krishna. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 81st chapter of Krishna, the Brahmana Sudama, blessed by Lord Krishna. Okay, very nice. So we actually have time for one question. Let's finish the chapter. 80 and 81 today. That's pretty good. So here's the question. Please, somebody raise it. If you could help me understand what was the exact reason why Rukmini Devi stopped Lord Krishna from further eating more chick rice. Because if Krishna had taken more, she would have been forced to bless Sudama Brahman with even more opulence. How we could have more opulence, I don't know, but that was enough blessings. And plus, she didn't want Krishna to eat food that wasn't really suitable for him. That was the second reason. The food really wasn't suitable for Krishna. It was just like old chip rice. Okay, that is the reason. Okay, and Brahmaji, you have a question. You can unmute yourself. Ask your question.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Anvat Pranam, please accept my humble obeisances.
Problem.
Maharaj, in this reading, you said Krishna doesn't reward his devotees with a lot of opulences, right? And then soon after we read that he also rewarded Sudama with a lot of opulence. So I'm confused.
Well, Krishna doesn't, if someone is not, let's say, pure, very pure, Krishna will not award his devotee with opulences because that devotee will fall down from the standard of devotional service. But if someone is bereft or doesn't have material desires, then Krishna gives them everything. It depends on the devotee's spiritual position. If someone is detached and actually attached to serving Krishna, then Krishna will give him everything and it's not going to really impede a devotee's spiritual progress. But if someone has some tendencies to enjoy this material world and Krishna gives him a lot, and I've seen that happen, then the devotee will deviate from Krishna consciousness, become very proud, attached to his money, and he'll give up his sadhana. So it depends. It actually depends. If someone is absolutely pure devotee like Sudama Brahman, no problem for Krishna to give him everything. But if someone is an immature devotee, big problem. Therefore, Krishna may take away everything instead of giving everything. Just depends. Krishna does what is best for a devotee. That's the real point. Whatever is best, either giving or taking, like Prabhupada said, his father said that Krishna has 10 hands. This is a metaphorical statement. And with 10 hands, if he wants to give you something, you can't keep yourself from getting it. And if he wants to take away something from you, you can't keep it in your hands anymore. Krishna will just take it away. So that's the point. Krishna Priya, quick question.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Quick. You got 1 minute.
I just had to unmute. My question is, so can we understand that this is a Leela between Krishna and his pure devotee? Because doesn't he also appear in Chaitanya Leela as Kovecha Sridhar?
Yes.
And then he goes back to just having nothing.
Yeah,
for his pastime.
it's a Leela. It's a Leela. I thought Kolovich or Sridhar.
That's what I'm wondering. Like at the
Other Kolovich or Sridhar sometimes described as in other ways. Anyway, whatever, it's a Leela. It's the Leela between the Lord and his devotees. Anyway, I have to check that out with Kolovich.
Because all of a sudden I just thought about him with the banana leaves, but then I'm not sure if I'm right or not. It was just something I remembered, but I might have remembered wrong.
Kolovecha Sridhar. No, he was actually Brajadami is Kusumasava Saka. That's what I thought.
Okay.
Yeah, he wasn't. He wasn't Kolovecha Sridhar. Yeah, I just looked it up. Yeah, because that's why I was hesitating to answer your question.
Yeah, I wasn't sure either. So who is Sudama Brahmana in Chaitanya Lila? Is it mentioned anywhere?
Sudama, not that I know of. Not that I know of. He's Kusumasava Saka.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, maybe someone else knows. Okay, thank you very much. It's time to end. We'll hopefully see everybody tomorrow.
Haribol.
Oh, so there was another thing. Just one other question. Why do materialist people have so much opulence when they are not following any principles? Material opulence doesn't mean they are blessed by Krishna. That material opulence is actually causing them great distress. For a devotee, material opulence can be used in Krishna's service, but for a non-devotee, material opulence actually causes anxiety. I mean, the more you have in this material world, you got to take care of it. You're in anxiety or losing it. I mean, look at Elon Musk, who just bought Twitter with billions of dollars. He's in anxiety because complete anxiety. He never gets any rest, you know. What is his happiness? Okay, on that happy note, we have to end. I'm sorry.